Hi makers, it's Michelle again with Fabric Funhouse. Today we're going to be talking about cork fabric. So what exactly is cork fabric? Cork fabric is an alternative to leather basically, in that it is a very long-lasting and durable material. It will increase the longevity of any project you use it with. What exactly is cork fabric and where does it come from? Well, the cork part of the cork fabric is actually a very, very thin sheet of cork. It's stripped from the bark of a cork oak tree. These corks grow around the West Mediterranean basin, though you can have manufacturers of the fabric in Spain, Portugal, and even China. For example, our fabric is manufactured in Spain, and how they harvest is very regulated. They go through, harvest the bark by stripping it from these cork oaks, which actually helps these trees to thrive. And it also helps produce more oxygen to the entire planet. They go through, strip the bark, mark that tree, and then they will not touch that tree again for several years. They do this periodically over time, and these trees can grow to be 100 to 200 years old. Today we're going to learn how to sew with cork fabric from beginning to end, so let's get started. So from the very beginning, you may not know how to tell quality cork. How I got started in cork fabric actually was a very not so good experience, to be honest. I went to a local quilt shop and happened upon cork fabric that they had in the shop. Bought a little piece to see what it was about, and the first time I went to sew with it, it actually broke, and I was kind of surprised. So I didn't try it again for a very long time. I saw a post on Instagram from a local girl that featuring cork fabric, and it didn't look anything like what I had bought. I ordered some, which happened to be from Fabric Funhouse, and got it hand delivered by the owner. That's how I got involved with the company. But when I sewed with it, it was night and day comparison. And I've found over the years that cork fabric actually kind of runs the gamut that way, where you can get very, very high quality fabric, and you can get kind of low grade, not so great cork fabric that you may love to practice on. There are uses for those. So let me tell you how to kind of tell those apart, I guess. How do I say this? Lower end cork fabric feels dry. There is no water-based sealant on top of cork fabric that is lower end, which can cause it to break and crack over time. Part of the reason you may not want to use it in a project that's special to you. You can get a higher end, thinner cork, and they have their specific uses, but personally I wouldn't use it for the outside of a bag because a lot of wear and tear is going to happen there. There are uses for thinner, higher grade cork fabric in that it has a little bit more drape than, say, ours will. It will make it a little less durable over time, but they definitely have their purpose. There is a definitive way, though, on how to tell if it's a decent cork fabric or not. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you feel the cork and it feels kind of dry and brittle, that might be because they have not added any water-based sealant like ours has. Also, if you have a pliable piece of cork fabric, but you can stretch it, that's definitely something you might want to avoid going forward, because it could very well lead to a problem down the road. If you pull a little bit on the side and it stretches, it's probably not going to last you as long as something that doesn't. Cork fabric does have a little bit of stretch, but not that much. The other way you can tell is the feeling on the backing. If it feels like something soft and pliable, a cotton poly or something like that, it's probably on the higher end of things. If it feels like a piece of ribbon or nylon, most likely it's going to be a very thin, not so high grade. It's very hard to explain. Right here was actually our first foray into cork fabric. Talia had ordered pretty much the first cork fabric that appeared on the US market, and this bag was made from that. And as you can see, over time it has completely worn off the color, it has cracked, it has worn, and cork fabric will wear over time, especially on tight corners or points or anything like that. But This was kind of on the crazy end of the spectrum as far as wear was concerned. So once we found out that that happened, and it kind of happened very quickly after the bag was made, we decided not to pursue carrying that specific cork. All right, so how are we going to get started? What do we need? We get these questions a lot. I don't know what kind of needle to use. Do you iron it? What kind of stitch length am I going to use for this? What kind of machine do you need? Honestly, you don't need much special. I don't know how else to say it. You need a little technique and a little patience. I've been sewing on a Singer Quantum Stylus 9960, I think is the number, for 9 years now. 9 years. I think it's time for an upgrade. But I started out with cork fabric on that. Most of my simple projects, I have not felt the need for a next level machine until very recently, when I've gotten more and more involved in bag making. So I don't think you would need a special machine. You can use just your domestic sewing machine with a little bit of, accoutrement. And you can use your straight stitch machine. Your Juki will probably sew through it like butter. But what you do need is a very, very sharp needle. So what we recommend is an 80 or a 90 Microtex needle. We happen to carry the Schmetz Microtex chrome needles, and the reason we carry the chrome needles is they do last longer. You shouldn't have to change your needle as often, and they reduce friction on your thread and on your material. So that's why we carry the chrome. But if you just have Microtex needles sitting around and you have an 80, you can go ahead and use that. You'll just want to change it for your next project. I rarely go to a 90. I rarely go to a denim needle. It'll poke a larger hole into the cork fabric. I would reserve that only if you're sewing through a lot of layers. To be honest, I've used all kinds of thread with cork fabric. I've used Coats & Clark. I've used Gutermann. I used Aurifil as soon as we got it in, and honestly, I'm a convert, but let me tell you kind of why I'm a convert. So I have here Coats & Clark, and I have Gutermann. I prefer the Gutermann. It was a little bit stronger over time. I have snapped a stitch using the Coats & Clark with just regular use of a bag, and it was just a mini crossbody. But I've noticed that because of the weight of the thread, and because it isn't, a tougher thread, it can wreck your hard work, basically. Gutermann was a good alternative. I used it for years and didn't have any issues with it for the most part. So, if that's where your price range is at and you don't want to invest in, a little bit higher end thread, I would definitely recommend Gutermann. It can help get you started on your project very quickly. We carry Aurifil, and we carry the 40 weight, and there's a reason. 40 weight is great for the longevity of your project. The weight of the Aurifil is great for top stitching as well. And to be honest, as soon as I sewed with it over the stuff I had been using, yeah, I'm gonna be buying Aurifil. So we do carry that in the shop. It's very easy to just add it to your cart. We do have complementary colors listed, which makes it, I hope, very easy for you to match your cork fabric or your wax canvas with a nice complementary color of thread. You can do a contrasting color, which makes it for great top stitching. There's a lot of things you can do with cork fabric, and you can modify pretty much any pattern to accommodate cork fabric. But there's some tips to that, which I'll get into. However, if it is your very first cork fabric project and all you knew is that you wanted to use cork fabric and you didn't know how, I would highly recommend using one of our patterns in the shop from Sonar. They're very simple patterns, they're easy to put together, and they're specifically designed to go with cork. It will be an easy, no fuss first project. My favorite simple project from her would be the wristlet clutch. It's super easy to put together in one afternoon. If you, however, want to modify an existing pattern, let's just take a bag pattern for example. The first thing I would start looking at is the interfacing required. One of the great things about cork fabric is that it's very self-stabilizing. It has some structure. So you don't need thick, bulky interfacing unless you just want that added structure to a bag. If you want your bag to have some structure, or you're making, like, say, a structured wallet, then you may want to keep in, say, the interfacing, but make it a lighter version. So if it calls for Decaville, maybe you want to use Decaville Light. It's kind of a personal call, and it does take some practice to get used to how to look at a pattern and modify it to fit cork fabric. So while Fabric Funhouse definitely recommends a Teflon foot so it will glide easily over the cork fabric, it's not necessary. You can use a regular A foot. I've been doing that for years. Or you can use a walking foot, especially if you're going through a lot of slippy layers. Do I pin my cork fabric? No, you do not. Please do not pin your cork fabric. I have made the mistake of pinning cork fabric before, and luckily for me, it was an immediate, oh no, and pulled the pin out. If you have accidentally pinned your cork fabric, there is something that you can try. It is fairly self-healing to a point. If you've just pinned your cork fabric and it hasn't been sitting in the drawer for a week or something, you can pull the pins out and apply some hot moisture steam to the cork fabric. Do not press an iron to the cork fabric. It can warp it. But if you want to, hold it over a tea kettle or some steam, it can close those holes enough to where you may not notice them. So just a tip for getting out holes in cork fabric. The other thing is you will want to get some Wonder Clips. Wonder Clips are amazing, and I use them all the time, especially when constructing straps. The other thing I really use a lot lately is Sew Tights. Sew Tights are basically a big magnet that you're going to put on either side of your cork fabric. I use this a lot to put pockets in place when I need to sew around them and I can't glue the pocket to the front of the cork. Like this. So this is a Maker's Tote by Noodlehead, and when I went to place this wax canvas pocket in the center, I needed it to stay there, and so I used Sew Tights to hold it to the cork fabric and sew around it. Now you do have to be careful. This does come with a big disclaimer. Some computerized sewing machines do not like magnets, and if you use them, it could damage your machine. So you need to know if that will happen. On my Singer, it has not happened at this time. I'm very careful with keeping it away from the computer part of things, but just so you know, you have to be very careful when using magnets. So a good alternative to magnets, if you can't use those to secure something in place and you have a little bit of time to wait for it to dry, is Fabri-Tac. We do carry Fabri-Tac in the shop. You can use this a variety of ways. You can adhere, cork pieces to something to applique. You can attach something that you're going to be sewing through the next day. You can use it to adhere your strap sides overnight and then sew them down the next day. I have done that before. So Fabri-Tac is a very versatile, flexible adhesive. It will help you keep things in place when you're ready to sew. I know that Nicole at Sonar definitely does this with her wallets, so that she will glue all of the parts to the wallet in place and sew through them the next day. That just gives it that added factor of it's not going anywhere. Another question we get a lot is zippers. It's so hard not to pin a zipper tape to your cork fabric. Sometimes the Wonder Clips just don't want to go where they need to go. So I've been doing this for a little while. I like to use 1/4-inch Wonder Tape to adhere a zipper to the cork fabric. You still will have to use Wonder Clips around it, but it just gives it that added little extra stay in place. When you get close to the zipper, a lot of times the cork fabric's not going to move like cotton, so it will not move out of the way of the zipper. It won't stay pinned to the edge. That's where I put my Wonder Tape, so that way it won't be moving. Another thing which we do not carry in the shop this time, but was recommended to us by several of our makers, is Tandy Leather Weld Adhesive. It is a water-based adhesive, but it's meant to hold leather pieces together, so that makes it perfect for cork fabric. All right, so we've got everything we need together to start our project, and we're going to sit down and start sewing. The first thing you need to do is adjust your stitch length. Don't say I didn't warn you. So the reason that we adjust our stitch length is, I'm showing you here, and I hope that you can see it. I'm going to try to make you see it. A smaller stitch length, especially when you're sewing through a lot of layers, has the tendency to perforate the cork. If you perforate the cork, you're creating a large hole that will not go away, and it can continue. It can weaken that structure on the cork fabric, and then over time it just won't allow your bag to last as long. So what we do is we adjust the stitch length to I start at a 3.5, and I can go up to a 5 if I'm sewing through quite a few layers. The best thing I can tell you to do is to practice. So what I like to do before I start any project, especially if I'm going through layers that I've never sewn together before, say Helen 101 and Decoville Lights and cork fabric and something else, I will, after I cut my pieces, get some scrap pieces together, put them together as if I were sewing them, and test my stitch length. And I recommend doing that before you get started with any project you haven't sewn before. And the reason being is you're probably going for a certain look anyway, and this will allow you to see what the perfect stitch length is for that. But I always start at 3.5 with cork fabric automatically, because I know lower than that is going to be too small and too close together. The other thing you'll want to keep in mind is when you get to, say, a zipper, say you're going around a bag and you're going from 2 pieces of cork fabric over a zipper to 2 pieces of cotton, you're going to have to adjust your stitch length in the middle. And the reason being is you're going from very thick things to very small things, and you'll want to keep that in mind to keep your stitch looking consistent. So again, I make notes all over my patterns. So I will say exactly what stitch length I was at for the cork fabric and cotton, where it looked exactly how I want it to look, or close enough alike that you can't tell a difference. And then I will adjust that as I'm going over. How do I say this? So I will go from, my 3.5 on the cork fabric. I will elongate it to go over the zipper, and then I will close it up to go to the cotton fabric. It's kind of a pain, but if you want your make to look perfect, that's exactly what I do. If you have a higher end machine, this may not be necessary. So you've sewn up your project and you're ready to finish. Cork fabric is kind of unique in that you can leave the edge raw. And my very first bag that I made was actually a simplicity pattern. It was a fold over clutch, and all I did was add a rectangle of cork fabric to the bottom of it, and I left the edge raw. I just top stitched it to the fabric pretty much. And I've had that bag for, I'd say I've had it for almost 4 years now, and I've used it off and on, not daily, but that raw edge has held up so phenomenally. Every once in a while you'll get a loose thread and you'll have to snip that off, but cork fabric can be left raw. If you want to keep that raw edge looking nice longer, what you can use is our fabric fusion pin that we carry in the shop. You'll apply this to the raw edge and smooth it out with either your finger or an applicator, and then allow that to dry. It will keep those threads from coming up over time, and it will keep your raw edge looking fresh. The other thing you can do to finish edging is going to be either an edge coat or Ghirardini, and I'm from Texas, I'm saying this incorrectly, Ghirardini Max Edge. And that is this edge coat right here. It does a perfect finish, and there's so many color options. We are actually working really hard to try and get that in the store, but no luck as of yet. So we'll keep trying. All right, so your project has been in use for quite a while. It's probably filthy, but the good news is cork fabric has natural antimicrobial properties. It's flame retardant, it's mildew resistant, it's hypoallergenic, and it's just pretty much amazing. Given the current circumstances of the world, one thing you should know about it is it's super easy to clean. You can take warm soap and water or a wet wipe. You can wipe your project down and it should remove all the dirt and nasty grime that you see here so that you can proceed. The other thing that I like to do, especially right now, I love carrying my cork wallet by itself. And the reason is when I get back to my car from the store, I can just take this natural hand sanitizer and wipe a little bit on this. It keeps it from being germy, and I can go on with my day knowing that, I'm protecting my family. So that's one thing that I do appreciate about cork fabric more than I used to. All right, gang, well, that's our video for today. I hope that that helps you with your next project. And until the next video, don't forget, all you need is a little love and a big idea. Thanks, guys.